Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm Andrew Destin of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined by our Penguins beat reporter, Matt Vensel, to talk about the latest on the Penguins front. And Pittsburgh just snapped a two-game slide with a come-from-behind win against the Vegas Golden Knights in Game 3 of what's a five-game homestand. Penguins will be back in action again tomorrow night, but there's plenty to talk about before we start to look ahead. And Matt, there's been some serious news for a longtime Penguins player and defenseman, Kris Letang. You've been there for all the practices and games this season. What's the latest on Letang?
Yes, if somehow Penguins fans missed this one, yes, Kris Letang had a stroke on Monday. It's considered to be a mild stroke. Ron Hextall said it was much less severe than the one that Kris had 8 years ago when he missed a couple months. And so for right now, he's out indefinitely. The Penguins, as of Thursday, which is yesterday, we're still getting further tests on Kris Letang. They're not going to give us a status on when he might return until all the testing is done and a medical plan is in place. Kris is in good spirits. He was at the game the following night. He was at Thursday night's game. Mike Sullivan said he got in a little twirl at the practice rink on Thursday. He hasn't been cleared for any strenuous activity. But he is allowed to get out and exercise. And Sullivan said that was more for maybe Kris's mental health than anything else. So all things considered, I think it's pretty good news considering the severity of a stroke and the fact that this is now the second one that Kris has had. But as far as hockey is concerned, there's not much information on when the Penguins might expect him back, other than they think this latest stroke will not be career-threatening for him.
Yeah, that last stroke you mentioned, 2014, missed a couple of months there for sure. You've seen now the Penguins play the last two games without him. He played against the Maple Leafs, didn't play on Tuesday against Carolina or last night against Vegas. How do you think they've managed his absence from strictly, an on-ice perspective these last two games?
Yeah, I think both of these games have been pretty solid games. I know they lost to the Hurricanes on Tuesday. That's a really good team. I thought they played pretty well, except for that collective brain fart there in overtime. And then Vegas, it was kind of a listless first period, and then they really turned it on. They used the cycle and the forecheck to spark the offense. So I think the one difference we have seen, and it might continue, is just the absence of Kris when it comes to the transition game. He fuels so much of what they do off the rush, and just in those two games, it's a small sample, but some of the rush numbers in terms of chances off the rush are down in those two games. So he's a good all-around player. He's more than just a guy who's sends breakout passes, but I think that's the biggest area where they will miss Kris, is just that his ability to spark the transition game and be creative in terms of retrieving pucks and getting them headed the other way on the breakout.
Yeah, and a guy who leads the team in time on the ice as well. Seems like every year he's just eating up minutes there on the blue line. And last thing about Letang, for that power play unit, it looks like Mike Sullivan is going with Jeff Petrie in place of Letang. How do you think he's done in filling in for Letang on that unit so far the last couple of games?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. Look, the unit overall has been woeful over the last couple of weeks. They did score a big 4-on-3 goal to spark their comeback against Vegas, but they've been a mess. I do think Petrie helps there. Actually, before Kris suffered the stroke, in a mailbag I wrote on Sunday, I advocated for temporarily taking Kris off the top unit and putting Petrie there, just because Petrie has more of a shoot-first mentality, and I think that's what they need, and it seems like that's what Mike Sullivan thinks what they need too. So Jeff has brought that. I know it's a 6-on-5 goal, but the tying goal against Carolina late in regulation, he just put it on net. Jake got a tip and it went in. So he brings that. But on the flip side, I think we've seen, in particular with Petrie back there, is just their breakouts on the power play and getting into the zone. It's better than it was in terms of some of those drop passes he makes to guys like Malkin, but still there's a lot of work to go there, I think, in terms of getting into the zone on the power play. And it's one of many, many, many issues for that unit right now.
Now, switching gears a little bit, Kasperi Kapanen got the game winner in last night's win with a third period goal against the Golden Knights. It was his first in 14 games. That it certainly hasn't been an easy season for Kapanen, considering the amount of times he's been a healthy scratch and just the long overhaul point between points. What was he like post-game, and what do you make of his overall performance on Thursday night, aside from the goal in other ways as well?
Sure. Yeah. After the game, he I mean, obviously he felt good. Not only that he scored, but he scored the game winner and the Penguins won the game. But he wasn't getting ahead of himself because he knows. I mean, he's been there before. It was a great game for him, a great shift on the goal. But he knows he's got to do a lot more than just have one or two good games to redeem himself. So he was a little bit more subdued, but obviously I think he felt a little bit of relief and a little bit of excitement to score. And as for his game overall, I mean, I think it was a really encouraging game. I mean, he was healthy scratch, I think, for 7 straight before drawing against Carolina. And even the play that led to his goal against Vegas, I mean, it summed up everything that Mike Sullivan wants to see from Kapanen. Earlier in the shift, he threw a hit on the forecheck, and just before his goal, I mean, he's the one who, with puck pursuit in the corner, was able to force a change of possession. Got out to the point, and then he went to the net, which is another thing they want to see from him. So it's kind of the whole package, like using his speed to disrupt and going to the net. And he was there to get a great pass from Brock McGinn and score the winner. So we'll see if he can keep it going. Obviously, I know a lot of fans are kind of tired of hearing about Kapanen because they'll have flashes like this and then go quiet for a couple of weeks. But he's an important player for them. I mean, Ron Hextall and the Penguins made a pretty big bet bringing him back on a 2-year contract. And even if it's someone they want to move down the road, he's got to show something now to make a team to want him. So he's an important player for the Penguins here, as we get close to the Christmas break.
Yeah, and somebody that, by all indications so far, they haven't shown that they've wanted to move yet, despite there being rumblings about that from fans and others. The penalty
I
kill,
think they might be open to it. It's just a question of, what would it take to move him,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. The penalty kill, which has been great since Teddy Bluger returned from that injury, it seemed to kind of take a turn for the worse on Saturday against the Golden Knights. What went wrong for the Pens PK units last night?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I don't know. I mean, that unit has been tremendous. It was a couple of, I don't want to say fluky goals, but abnormal power play goals scored by Vegas on Thursday. The first one, the puck almost dribbled over the blue line out of the zone, and the Penguins put a little pressure on, and the Golden Knights patiently kind of picked them apart as they got stretched out trying to pounce on that loose puck. And, Mike Vellucci, who runs that unit, wants them to be aggressive, and it just kind of was like, circumstances that led to them kind of getting pulled out of position. And then the second goal, the go-ahead goal in the third period by Shea Theodore, just a simple shot through a crowd. It looked like maybe it might have deflected in off Jan Ruda's shin guard, but just kind of a fluky goal there. So they've been great. I don't think there's anything to worry about there with that unit. They've been really good. It just was one of those nights for them. They were bound to have a letdown at some point.
Unit that was perfect 19 for 19 in its previous opportunities on the PK. Slipped up a little bit, but it seems like nothing terribly much to worry about there. This morning, you wrote about POJ settling into his role recently, sticking with the blue line. What do you think has been key to him getting his feet under him with the Pens this year?
Yeah, consistency has been the knock on P.O. Joseph. Ever since he was a draft prospect, what is it, 6-7 years ago now, when he was drafted in the first round by Arizona. I mean, obviously, fans fixate on his lack of bulk and physicality. I don't know if he's ever going to add that. He's just a lanky kid. But it's really more so the inconsistency what kind of prevented him from getting to the NHL on a regular basis until this point. But he's smoothed it out. I mean, he had a rocky preseason. He was in trade rumors. And the Penguins just harped on him to just, take what's there. Don't try to force things. And by working with Todd Brereton in the video room and in practice, he's really settled down. And it's just making the simple play. I mean, a good example of that is the pass he made to Jake Vensel in the Carolina game that led to a 2-on-1 and a goal for Sidney Crosby. It wasn't flashy. It just was a smart decision, a quick decision, and an accurate pass. So that's what they want to see from him. So I think the biggest jump in what you see from the numbers is that transition game. He's completing more stretch passes. He's carrying the puck more out of the zone and, more zone entries at the other end. So I think that's probably the biggest change. I mean, he's an active defender. He's got a good stick. He's not going to win a lot of puck battles with physicality. We'll see a big, heavy team here this weekend in St. Louis that might push him around a little bit, but he's figuring out how to use the things he does do well, and he's just keeping it simple, and that's going a long way for him right now.
Brings me to my final question. The Penguins, you mentioned, welcome a struggling St. Louis Blues squad to PPG Paints Arena on Saturday night. St. Louis has lost 4 or 5 giving up at least 4 goals in each of those games. How do you think the Penguins match up against this team?
Yeah, I mean, they're a physical opponent. That has the potential to give the Penguins problems if they get away from their own game. They don't have the biggest team, especially in the back end, although getting Ruda and Petrie have helped. So, yeah, I know the Blues are struggling. They're typically a pretty good defensive team, and at least in years past, and that has not been the case this year, even though it's a lot of the same personnel. So even though they're scuffling right now, they're still a good team. They have talent, and the Penguins can't overlook them for sure. I mean, they're inconsistent themselves. I mean, however you want to look at the numbers of what they've done over the last 12 games, you can bend them any one way. I mean, they've lost 2 or 3. They've won, I think, 8 or 12. It's 500 over the last month. I mean, it's all how you want to look at those numbers. But the key point is they're still an inconsistent team, and they need to just stay on it and head into the break here. So I know the Blues are struggling, but I think it should be a good game, and there'll be a tough test for the Penguins for sure.
A Blues team that still has a lot of talent from that Stanley Cup winning team a few years back. That's all about all the time that we've got for today's breakdown of the latest in Penguins hockey. Hit the like button if you enjoy this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel to keep up with our latest content. And if you haven't already, check out our subscription deal in the description below. $6 for 6 months of access. Plenty of sports news going on in Pittsburgh, and you don't want to miss it. Matt, thank you so much for your time. Everybody else, we'll see you again next time.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.